I'll be your worship leader for this morning's service, and I'm joined by Jake Spotted Wolf, our speaker, and Alex Myers at the piano. If you are a visitor online and would like Northwest to stay in touch with you, please fill out the visitor form appearing in the chat box. If you're with us in person, you can fill out the visitor sign-in form in the atrium. And we welcome our friends from Birmingham Unitarian Church this morning who are here with their children who are in our OWL program. Please greet your neighbor with a wave from wherever you are. This being Northwest, we have a few announcements to share with you. You'll find more information about Northwest and its events in the weekly newsletter and on our website. Next Sunday, November 24th, we will have a joint service here at Northwest with UU Detroit and UU Farmington. We'll share a potluck lunch afterwards. On Thursday, November 21st, we will have a candlelight vigil for the Transgender Day of Remembrance. The vigil will be here in the sanctuary at 6:30 after our usual Thursday soup dinner. Next Saturday, November 23rd, is our congregational care retreat from noon to 3 p.m. We'll share another potluck lunch as we discuss visitor retention, caring activities, pathways to membership, and more. All are welcome. And next Sunday, our children and youth will be filling Thanksgiving baskets as a service project. Please bring non-perishable food items for donation. You can also make a financial contribution through Breeze by selecting the Thanksgiving basket funds. Before we begin the prelude, let's all take a deep breath and settle into a time of worship. The flaming chalice is the symbol of our faith. We light it knowing this morning that many other Unitarian Universalist congregations across the world are doing the same. We light our chalice with words from the Northwest mission statement. Please repeat after me. We light this flame.
We light this flame.
To grow in spirit, knowledge, and action.
To grow in spirit, knowledge, and action.
Accept and challenge one another.
To accept and challenge one another.
To support each other in times of joy and need.
To support each other in times of joy and need.
Each week, we offer a land acknowledgement. We honor and pay our respects to the land on which we work and live, which was violently stolen through colonialism, genocide, and the forced removal of its traditional stewards. They are the Anishinaabe, the Council of the Three Fires, which include the Ottawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi, also known as the Ottawa, Chippewa, and Potawatomi tribes. We also acknowledge the people of African descent who were forcibly removed from their land and separated from their families through kidnapping and enslavement, and pay reverence and respect to them for building this country's infrastructure and economy with no compensation or reparations to date. And body your spirit and join in singing hymn number 153, Oh, I Woke Up This Morning. Now I'd like to invite Jim Moyer up to read our story this morning.
So our story is called The Together Tree, and it's written by Aisha Saeed, but the great thing about it, it's one of my favorite illustrators, Lewin Pham, and it's a beautiful story about a new kid coming to school. Rumi joined Miss Garza's class on the first warm day of spring Icicles melted from trees, water dripped from the eaves, droplets trailed down the windows. Rumi is from San Francisco, Miss Garza said, on the other side of the country. Let's make him feel at home. Rumi got the best seat in class, next to the class hamster, Waffles, and Lolo, the goldfish. The kids stared at Rumi. But Rumi stared out the window. At recess, the grass looked so green against the sky full of sunshine and blue. Ella raced down the slide. Asher played tag with Han. Rumi twirled a twig beneath a shady old willow tree. When he heard a laugh, he looked up. 3 kids stood by the swings. His shoes are ugly, Asher said, laughing. And big, Ella giggled. The laces are untied, too. Han didn't think it was funny. He didn't say a word. Rumi looked down at his shoes. He'd colored them with his friends back home, where the cypress trees grew and the fog rolled deep. Back home, they played kickball. Back home, they built sandcastles. But things were different now. He twirled his twig beneath the shady old willow tree, and something began to hurt. In music class later that week, when Mr. Simon played the flute, Asher crumpled up and tossed a paper. It landed on Rumi's shoe. When Ellie saw, she smiled and giggled. Hans simply stared. Rumi studied his shoes, the painted cars, rainbow, and balloons. He tried his best not to cry. The next day at recess, Ella skipped, Asher ran, Han crossed the monkey bars, and Rumi stayed alone by himself, twirling a twig beneath the shady old willow tree. Then Asher picked up a pebble. He flung it in the air. It flew, it spun, it sputtered, it scraped against Rumi's knee. This time Ella didn't giggle. Everyone stood still. And Rumi felt something salty and wet, a tear slide down his cheek. Rumi, Han called out, I was wondering if it was okay if I could play with you. And that's when Han looked down and saw what Rumi was doing with his twig. He was drawing a beautiful world out of dirt. Look at all this. There's a lion and a big dragon and a castle and a mermaid. At the end of the day, Asher slipped Rumi a note. I'm sorry. I hope you are okay. The next day, Han and Rumi drew together, building butterflies and castles from dirt. Ella asked to play. Connor and Devin did too. Sure, Rumi said, and soon everyone joined in. But look at Rumi's eyes. They're looking into the window. Everyone except Asher. He had wandered back to class. Rumi watched him through the window where he had a pile of blocks on his desk. And then he looked at the kids, his brand new friends in his brand new city, and said, let's go inside too. And there they are. They all came back inside, and Rumi's giving Asher a leaf from the tree. Together they ate lunch the next day, and later at beneath the shady old willow tree. And that is our story. So now we're going to carry the flame out. Our kids are going to help us get ready for coffee hour. And a bunch of us from the religious education program are going to help them do that. So we're going to sing our usual song for the kids to go out. And we need somebody to carry the flame. And I see Riley is here as a guest. Maybe you could help Riley take the chalice out for us. Could you two come up and do it? So hold them both, yeah. We're going to sing them out.
Each week, Northwest shares its plate collection with a community partner. This month, that partner is the City of Southfield's Emergency Needs Fund. Their goal is to help residents overcome personal hurdles to achieve a satisfying and productive quality of life. All undesignated donations will be split between the Southfield Emergency Needs Fund and our congregation. You can give through a variety of ways that are visible on your screen, and we are passing a collection baskets for checks and cash for those who are here. We honor this, your generosity, by committing to ensure that our collective resources do a greater good for ourselves and the world than any could have done individually.
Good morning. I'm Mary Mueller. I'm a member of the Northwest UU Pastoral Care Team. I want to remind you that anyone needing the support of our community can reach out to our Minister of Pastoral Care, Reverend Teresa Rolk, in the weekly drop-in Zoom room or in one-on-one appointments by emailing pastoralcare@northwestuu.org. The collective cares of our community are recorded in our Book of Joys and Sorrows, which will remain on the red cabinet near the name tags. If you would like to submit a joy or sorrow virtually, please email pastoralcare@northwestuu.org. When I announce your name, please raise your hand. Ariana Abel, is sharing the following sorrow. Her nephew is not doing well, and she would like people to ask her about it after this, during coffee hour. Jim Johnson, there you are. Jim is holding a sorrow that may turn into a joy. Kaya Davidson is still recovering from a fall over 5 months ago. Any visitors would be appreciated. For these and the joys and sorrows that are held in the silent sanctuary of our hearts, I offer this prayer. Sources of radiance and resilience, keep watch with those who work or watch or weep this night. May the suffering be soothed, may the sick be tended, may the weary find rest, may the dying and those who love them find peace. May the joyous be shielded, and may all know that we are surrounded in a love that is with us always, a web that connects us to all that exists. Let us take a few moments of silence to be with each other in this sacred space, and we will come out singing Spirit of Life.
This isn't a reading, it's a reflection, so just in the spirit of keeping you informed. This month, we are exploring the concept of repair at Northwest. When the worship team was asked to consider what ideas that theme sparked in them, I immediately thought about reparations for Native Americans and the descendants of enslaved people of African descent. I recognize that you can't fix that harm, and we know that this country is collectively not very good at admitting its flaws, let alone working towards repairing them. And I think it's hard to imagine what repair could look like, because most of us go to, oh, so that would mean giving how much money to each person. But I wanted to share about an effort that I have had the chance to experience at the college I attended in Southwest Ohio, where there are 2 rivers and a university named Miami. What is missing is the source of those names, the Miami tribe, which was removed from the area through U.S. policy in 1847, some 20 plus years after Miami started accepting students. Today, the Miami tribe is a sovereign nation located in Oklahoma. The tribe was completely disconnected from its ancestral lands until the early 1970s, when the Miami chief was in Cincinnati. Having learned about a nearby university that was named for his tribe, he met with the university president, starting what has become a robust and lasting partnership between the Miami tribe and Miami University. It started with some largely symbolic things, but significant. The university changed its mascot to the Red Hawks rather than having a race-based mascot. The big work happened when the university created a scholarship, the Miami Heritage Award, for tribal members. To date, more than 140 tribal members have pursued degrees at the university while connecting more deeply with their heritage. In the 90s, the university agreed to 3 years of funding for the work of a tribal linguist seeking to restore the Miami spoken language. The language had been lost through the forced removals and forced assimilation practices. The last fluent speakers had died in the 1960s, and only a few spoken names and written documents remained. This 3-year effort has become the Miami Center, a tribal-led and staffed organization supported by and integrated into the university. Today, the center houses a national archive of indigenous language as an outgrowth of that initial linguistic work. The university's computer science department created a suite of software to facilitate collecting, studying, and teaching the language. The center creates content for K through 12 Ohio history curriculum, leading to more accurate history being taught in the state. It provides programming on the tribal lands in Oklahoma. It supports the Miami students who are on campus, hosts a biennial academic conference, and provides content about the Miami culture and history throughout the year on campus. I got to learn about the center through my own participation in grandparent college at Miami. I have learned some traditional Miami crafts and games and been exposed to a bit of the language. I've chatted with a staff member who shared her experience of learning the language as an adult and admittedly not being so great at it, and raising completely bilingual children who are far more fluent than she is. The Miami Center enriched my life, but I don't need repair. I actually benefited from going to school on traditional Miami land. However, tribal members say it is healing to participate in the revitalization of their culture and language. Knowing that makes the university's land acknowledgement hit me differently than any other. First of all, it was a collaborative creation of the tribe and the university. And it's not just words. It is a commitment to restoring and lifting up the language and culture of a people whose lives are still impacted by the harm that began more than 2 centuries ago. And when I think about that, I think about what could we do on a microcosm level. Clearly, we're not gonna, through our 125 people, bring back a language. And we do show our interest in people outside our walls through our shared basket, through things like basket packing next week. But what would happen if we chose to partner with an organization on an ongoing basis, listening deeply to their goals and bringing our time, talent, and financial resources to support their efforts? I believe that in a deep commitment to changing the lives of others, we will certainly change our own lives. To rise in spirit of body and join in singing hymn number 318, we would be one. Now I invite Jake Spotted Wolf to come up and talk to us about the myths of Thanksgiving.
Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for everyone being here today. My name, excuse me, Jake Spotted Wolf, Omani Washde Okangu Winyan. In my language, that means walks the good road woman. I come from Hidaza territory out in North Dakota, and Assiniboine and Lakota territory out in Fort Peck, Montana. The topic of reparations, as I sat there, because I usually try to connect with spirit, to figure out how I'm going to, approach a discussion. I've got a talk ready. I've got some information and some education for you. But on that topic of reparations, people do think it's just about money. And what if I posited that it's about an action, right? What if you stood in solidarity after you hear what I give you today for information and didn't celebrate Thanksgiving? Anytime I posit that to somebody, they get real cranky about it. They get really upset. That's the one day I can spend with my family where we come together and we have a meal together. We don't get to have meals as Native Americans together. I am so dislocated from my family, I won't be able to fly back, right? Like there's a lot that goes on with me traveling back to my homelands in Montana. It's a very prohibitive process. And it's not just that, it's the falsity of Thanksgiving. It was about murder, it was about genocide, right? And challenging that concept that you've been doing this for generations in your family, it's what you know. If you weren't to celebrate Thanksgiving this year, you would be defying grandma and grandpa and auntie and uncle, and who wouldn't get to eat the green bean casserole, right? It would be jarring not to celebrate. But it would be solidarity for the people whose land you live on, right? For the people who are no longer here in Wawiatanong, who used to live here, that don't have a home here anymore because of settlerism, right? So it doesn't have to be land back, because that's also very challenging for a lot of people, anybody that owns property. And we have the land back discussion about turning property over back to Native peoples, turning the US forests back over to Native stewardship. It's a very contentious topic. But it could be a simple act of not celebrating on a day and instead remembering it as a day of mourning, which is what a lot of friends I know in the Native community do. I'm not gonna celebrate around a big meal with my nephews who I now have custody of, who I had to take off of our reservation because it's so dangerous and violent back there. And because kids don't graduate, and because a lot of kids die before they're 18, and that's the truth. And they didn't have a future back there because conditions are so poor on reservation spaces. I'm gonna take them to a water park, and I'm gonna let them splash in the water, and we're gonna celebrate and remember it as a day of celebration, Indigenous celebration and joy that we're still alive. Because at 46, I've barely made it here, and I didn't know if they were gonna make it at all. So just consider it. Consider doing something that feels very, very uncomfortable, that might involve no money whatsoever, but challenges your concept of what is acceptable, what society expects you to do, of what your family has set before you, and challenging that. I'm gonna read a little bit on the truth of Thanksgiving. I took from a couple of different excerpts. The idea gained purchase in the late 19th century when there was an enormous amount of anxiety and agitation over immigration. The white Protestant stock of the United States was widely unhappy about the influx of European Catholics and Jews, wanted to assert its cultural authority over these newcomers. How better than to do that than to create this national founding myth around the Pilgrims and the Indians inviting them to take over the land. That is truly, if you think about it, all the stories you were taught in elementary school, how did it go down? It was natives feeding white settlers, making sure they were cared for, they had clothes, they had food, and then, here, please, take this land, we don't want it anymore. What? Why would we do that? We've been here for thousands of years, we didn't want to give over our land. That's where our dead are buried, that's where our ancestors are, that's where we got every story of creation from. We didn't want to hand over our land. We were forced to over time, over a lot of very strategic campaigning through the US military after the settlerism took hold in the Northeast and in the Southeast. What's more, during Reconstruction, that Thanksgiving myth allowed New Englanders to create this idea that bloodless colonialism in their region was the origin of the country. So if we just handed it over, it erases that part in your mind that there was ever any wrongdoing, that the settlers came over and took that land in bloodshed, having nothing to do with the Indian Wars and slavery, which we all know happened, but we don't talk about the Indian Wars, and we like to forget that enslavement ever did happen. Americans could feel good about their colonial past without having to consider that there was any bloodshed at all. And then a different excerpt, no centuries-long continuity emerged from that 1621 meetup. It didn't happen. There had been tribes cohorting with settlers for decades before that. It wasn't 1621 that established this. It had been going on for many, many years, but for whatever reason, that was the chosen time. That's when pilgrims came, that's when there's new relationship budded. That's when settlers almost died because they didn't know how to farm the land. They didn't know how to, live in the weather in that region. New Englanders certainly celebrated Thanksgivings, often in both fall and spring, but they were of the fasting and prayer variety. Notable examples took place in 1637 and 1676, following bloody victories over Native people. That's what they were giving thanks for. There was another tribe gone. Another band had been removed. They had more access to land now. We are giving thanks to Creator because in a white settler's mind, through the pontiffs back in the 1400s, that it was decreed that manifest destiny, that white people had access to this land over here in this new territory. It was meant to be by God. So in their brains, they're thanking God for removing yet another tribe, another band from that region, because now they have more land to take as their own. That's what they're giving thanks for. That's genuinely what you're giving thanks for when you sit with your relatives on Thanksgiving Day. We can't ignore that. We can't erase that. We cannot pretend that it's not true. You have to sit with that this year. You have to. I will not give you permission not to. You can sit and have that food and enjoy all the creme brulee, and I also like turkey, but you're gonna have to sit with that fact this year and really mull it over. To mark the second occasion, the Plymouth men mounted the head of Assamakwin's son, Pematukomun, above their town on a pike where it remained for 2 decades. They kept that man's head on a pike in thanksgiving of that tribe being removed and celebrated it. So this wasn't a genuine handing over the land, and we would love to share this space with you. At one point, people had to make decisions, though, in their bands about how they had to align with white settlers in order to try to keep their band alive. It remained for 2 decades while his dismembered and unburied body decomposed. The less brutal holiday that we celebrate today took shape 2 centuries later as an effort to entrench an imagined American community. In 1841, the Reverend Alexander Young explicitly linked 3 things: the 1621 rejoicing, the tradition of autumnal harvest festivals, and the name Thanksgiving. He did so in a 4-line throwaway gesture and a 1-line footnote. Of such half-thoughts is history made. A couple of decades later, Sarah Josepha Hale, the editor of Godey's Lady book, proposed a day of unity and remembrance to counter the trauma of the Civil War. That's how we have Thanksgiving today. The disunity that had happened after the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln was trying to find a way to unify the North and the South, but also to try to ease tensions, because this is, if you know, about the time that the Indian Wars are happening back west, and that lands are rapidly being taken by settler colonialism, and the US Army is just annihilating tribes from the Mississippi all the way to the West Coast. So Thanksgiving was meant to try to make that a little softer, if you will. Try to make it seem like it wasn't as bad out there as we thought, and that tensions between North and South should just dissipate if we all just sit around and have a meal. White, Protestant, Democratic, and blessed with American character centered on family work with individualism, freedom, and faith was that component that was supposed to bring the common thread into Thanksgiving, while they're forgetting a huge part of the population, the natives and the enslaved, who were just freed but just severely traumatized through centuries of white settler colonialism. The news story aligned neatly with the defeat of American Indian resistance in the West and the rising tide of celebratory regret that the anthropologist Renato Rosaldo once called imperialist nostalgia. It's important to remember that term, where you sit today and where you think today, because it's easy for white people to forget what happened, what's happened in this country, what's happened collectively when you have social safety, when you have financial safety, when you have environmental safety, when you've got a home you can go to and relax into at night. It's easy to forget what happened and what's still happening around us. Erasure is still happening. The genocide to Native people is still happening right here today. It's just a lot quieter. It's systematic. It's the supply chain fracture. It's the resource desert of Fort Peck, that people are walking around in windbreakers in 10-degree weather, no gloves, no hat, no coat, because they can't get access to resources. There's not food banks unless they go to a Christian church and they align with the message and go to church every Sunday. And the Christian church is what destroyed their identity in the first place, right? Took away everything they knew, forced them to cut their hair, forced them to change their names, stop dancing their dances, stop speaking their language, and become white. So it's still happening today, still happening in the missing and murdered women that are all over Turtle Island that nobody is looking for. It's still happening in the suicide rates. It's still happening in the dropout rates. It's still happening that we die 30 years younger than the white population on average. I can expect to live to 52. If I live past that, I'm a miracle in my community. The news story aligned, glorifying the endurance of white pilgrim founders diverted attention from the brutality of Jim Crow and racial violence. and downplayed the foundational role of African slavery. The fable also allowed its audience to avert its eyes from the marginalization of Asian and Latinx labor populations, the people that had been brought over here to build the railroads for 30 cents less than their white counterparts. They were being told that their spouses couldn't come over from China. There were laws put into place. The racialization of Southern Europe and Eastern European immigrants and the rise of eugenics. At Thanksgiving, white New England cheerfully shoved the problematic South and West off to the side and claimed America for itself. So that's a lot, and it's really heavy. My talks are not easy, but they're necessary because we have a forgetful memory. We don't want to do critical race theory. We now have another 4 years of fascism. I mean, it was fascism or fascism light for me, right? That's what I had to look at in this election, and that's also something very hard to swallow, but it was true. One party was for fracking and for taking more indigenous lands, and the other party was just honest about that, And as we look at that future and how hard it will be, now is the time to get very honest about what this country has been through. Talk to your neighbors, talk to your community members, have the hard, uncomfortable conversations that make you feel very tense inside, because there's a good part of this population in this country who live tense all day, every day, that don't get to relax. And we have to bond together in some way with those who are privileged in order to figure this out and to get out of this mess. So I have more talks on different things. If you guys want books and literature, I have a whole Google Doc of accurate American Indian history that I would hope that you guys would read, because what we were taught in school, what we were taught in the narratives that are still around is that natives are living wealthy off of casino money, and that my kids will go to college for free. Both lies, both lies. We don't get to go to college for free. We don't got a casino out on Fort Berthold, and not every reservation does, right? There's a lot of myth around how Native Americans are existing today, and it's not good. There's a lot of problems in Native American communities, and it's all because of settlerism. So come and find me afterwards, and I'll lay off for right now, but thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jake. I'm sure that there will be people who want to talk to you afterwards. Our closing hymn is hymn number 1014, and we use the words "answering the call of love," not the words that are written in your hymnal. So please rise in body or spirit and sing "Answering the Call of Love." We will now extinguish our chalice. Please repeat after me. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of hope. The warmth of community. Or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Go now. Think deeply about what you heard this morning and act on those words.